going to talk about the top 10 loadouts in Warzone. Before we get into that, I wanted to make sure you guys are aware of the automatic tac sprint issue. If you have it set to automatic tac sprint, it's going to cancel your reload until they put out a patch. So switch it to automatic sprint until that update comes through. If you're already on this, it should be fine. Just make sure you're holding that reload button and it'll ensure you get that full reload and not cancel it. There is a big problem when it comes to the meta though, and I called this a while ago, and the problem is if you're not doing enough buffs, you're gonna make the game feel like trash because all you're doing is making guns worse. And I talked about this quite a bit in our recent spectating randoms, where it's kind of like one of those things where the gun, you want everything to feel good, and what happens is when you take the good stuff and you nerf them, everything ends up feeling like trash. Based off the season update, I think one of the main go-tos is gonna be the SVA, DG58, LSW. Sniper support, we got WSP9. The striker got that long range buff. A lot of people are saying you should check it out for close range, but it really got buffed in the min damage, which is the long range. So that could definitely be considered, and we'll cover that today. And then for the close range, it gets a little bit weird because WSP9 has its own set of issues with the open bolt delay, even though they sped up the sprint to fire time by about 50 milliseconds. Striker 9 has decent mobility, decent recoil, mainly vertical. But the biggest problem with that is the TTK isn't particularly fast at 630. The JAK BP50, which is a pretty solid option. I'm not a particular fan of it, but it does get the job done with a pretty good TTK. Ram 9 kind of already got nerfed. Striker has its weaknesses. The JAK, I mean, all of these kind of have their issues. And then we have some gimmicky guns. The Akimbo WSP Stingers, pretty solid now, especially since the up close got nerfed. You can actually get to barrel stuffing. Just wish the gun had a little bit better hipfire spread. JAK MCW, this is another offshoot one that I think a lot of people will still like. We've covered for months on the channel, but now it's kind of moved up the list. Core 45, also another one. I do understand a lot of people bring this up with the Core 45, that if you put on the fastest fire rate and then you're using some kind of macro or scroll wheel to essentially cheat and reach that max trigger cap to get the theoretical TTK, you are cheating. That's not normal. You can't actually click 900 times a minute. You're not going to be able to do that. So let's go ahead and not talk about that and get into the actual loadouts. You might want to modify them a little bit, but I built this striker specifically for sniper support to combine with this one because we're doing top 10 weapons or loadouts in this particular case. So we got the striker. This one again is built more for that sniper support, and that's kind of how I built it. And the main thing here is we're getting around 600 bullet velocity, which is good, especially with the hit scan information that brings up to about 32 meters will be hit scan. And I've kind of built it so that you can go ahead and damage people at a decent range. Very little recoil. The bullet velocity feels nice. And you can hit targets at the range and then swap to your sniper. Then for the mores, we have this kind of built out here. And this one's primarily to get those one-shot kills. You do have to charge it, which is kind of a downside for some. But this will give you infinite one-shot sniper range. And the other part of it is because the bullet velocity is so high, it essentially makes it hit scan basically up to around 100 meters. You don't have to adjust for anything, and you'll get those one-shot kills. So that's kind of how that one works. I'm not a huge sniper fan. If you want faster snipers, the Stalker's great. The Mores could be built differently, but then it'll have a closer cutoff range where you won't be able to get the one-shot snipes. Then this gets into some of these other ones, which I think are competitive, but maybe not 100% the hard meta. If you get bored with the meta, which we often do, we had the Ram 7 and the HRM for so long, they just got boring, and you got to be able to have other things that you can use. So in this particular case, we're using the MTZ 556 along with the close range BP50. Again, both of these are very solid options. I think they do have strengths and weaknesses on their own, but they can be utilized to actually just have fun with, especially on something like Rebirth Island, where the ranges aren't nearly as far. And that's where I think a lot of people are playing. You can let me know in the comments if you're playing somewhere else, but that's kind of how I have it built out so that you can control that recoil and manage that quite well. Then we have over here the BP50, which is with the conversion kit. Like I said, I was never a huge fan of this. On paper, the TTK should be good, but every time I use it, I just feel like I would rather use another gun. And that's unfortunate because I know a lot of people love it. You might be one of them that do. And that's going to bring us to the next category, which is going to be that MCW, which is the SMG build, and then the BP50 for long range. Unfortunately, we can't do double BP50s unless you buy them from the buy station. Otherwise, you could do a double BP class setup. Something to keep in mind with these builds as well is if you kind of look at this, it's going to be a double AR build, which kind of sucks on ammo. So make sure you got those munitions, or you're picking up those extra stacks or hitting those munition stacks to go ahead and stack up on those as well. So when we get in here, this MCW is kind of built more for that close range quarters. A lot of people really like this quarters classic reflex because it gives you those XM4 vibes that we had, because it's essentially that Cold War optic, and it feels pretty good. For whatever reason, I'm not the biggest fan of this one. Same thing like with the BP50 close quarters. A lot of people gas it up, and then I'm like, it doesn't feel right. Something about it feels off, and I've tried different builds. It's just kind of the one I ended up on, but there you kind of go. And then we get the BP50, which this is more for long range, medium range. I think the TTK sits at a really good spot. I really like the floor loot of this gun, even though it doesn't kill crazy good up close with the base version. This one kind of counteracts one of the biggest problems this gun has, which is that vertical recoil. So you just got to be able to pull down, almost no side to side. You can kind of see it does have a little bit of rise towards the end. And that's if you're going full auto the entire time. So it'll be straight, and then you'll see it mostly kind of just keep that straight. You're good to go. Overall, a very forgiving weapon because of the fast fire rate, but unforgiving in the sense that you get a 45 round mag. Too bad you can't hold that same 60 that the conversion kit allows you to hold. I just wish we had mags big enough, especially if they're going to keep slowing down the TTK. It's going to make it so you need more shots to kill, and it becomes a lot less viable options. We've kind of already crossed that threshold of where the health is. We just need to make it so that there's enough bullets to down 2 players per mag. And that's kind of a sweet spot for long range as well as short range. And this gives us into what I would consider more of the hard meta. And depending on what your preferences are, you might go with the SVA over the LSW for long range, or you're going to go over the Striker versus the WSP9. So I think the vast majority of people will enjoy either of those. Many of you have probably already tried those and you were looking for something new. Unfortunately, we're in that meta bubble where it kind of most of the stuff feels like whatever. So we'll go ahead and go through this one first. So this one's kind of the long range option. The great part is that even with this build, we're getting a decent bullet velocity of over 1,000, which again gives us about 52 meters on that hit scan range that we talked about in the previous video. We go into the range, you can kind of see it doesn't look like it moves very much. Obviously, those dummies aren't supposed to be like all that far, but this is a 50-meter target. So you're going to be able to hit range up to that point. And then when you go ahead and kind of look at the individual recoil, you can see it's not really like a fast climber. And all you do is just hold down a little bit of side to side. But again, not a big deal. Once you hold down on the right joystick, you're good to go. So definitely try that one out. It's good, especially after the buffs. It was good before, but now it's actually very good. I don't know. SVA is still just kind of brain dead easy to use, so we'll talk about that. And this one is if you do not mind the iron sight. Most of your targets will be a little bit closer. I'm not a huge fan of these, even though they're fairly clean. The extra 2 bars that come up are a little bit blocking of your view compared to some of the other options we've had. But overall, you can see that this thing, pretty good. I struggle probably a little bit at 50 meters, but the reality is you shouldn't be challenging people at 50 meters. 25 meters is more than enough for this gun, and it feels pretty solid at that range. Then we get the SVA, which is multiple builds. I think there's not really too many bad builds on the SVA, but there's a lot of good builds, which is pretty nice spot to be in. So even if your build looks slightly different, I'll talk about some variations when it comes to this. You're going to want to run it in single fire and do the tap burst. You could keep it in full auto if you want. It just kills a little bit more consistently fast if you keep it in semi-auto, and that's just kind of how it goes. Maybe you toggle between depending on what range your target's at. But you can do sonic suppressor. You could go further and go ahead and get something like the Harbinger if you wanted to get even more bullet velocity out of it. The problem with this though, it's going to slow you down 100 milliseconds. So something like that's not worth it. You could reduce the spread of the bullets by also putting on something like the Zemin. You could do that, and you'll lose a little bit of bullet velocity. Or you can get rid of high grain, and then you can actually put on the underbarrel for the Bruin heavy support. And the main thing for that is just, you can get the tighter spread, because if you fire into the sky, you'll see the bullets kind of go like this, like this, like this. Sometimes they go near each other. Anytime you're reducing the recoil, improve the consistency of those shots so that you can get the regular 2 burst actually hitting, the hyper burst actually hitting. So this is a build for that. And pretty much what will happen is when you put this in semi-auto, you don't have to adjust for recoil. No matter how fast you do it, you can go ahead and kind of do that. The reason why I don't tend to leave it in full auto is because what will happen is if I do this too fast, you can see the inconsistency because my trigger finger's fast enough where a third bullet comes out because it registers as me holding it for half a second or whatever the case is. So I tend to just do that so I can get a nice consistent 2 bursts, 2 bursts, 2 bursts, 2 bursts all the way through. Last but not least, the striker. And one important attachment that we've changed for a lot of our builds, not all of them, is the DR hand stop to the XRK edge. And this is something because the DR56 or the DR6 hand stop got nerfed. The main thing I look at though is in general, the XRK is going to be better for like 99% of situations. But in some instances where a gun might have a slow sprint to fire, like in this case, it's only 105. It's not terrible. There's some that are like 170. You might go with the hand stop. An example of this was the MCW, which we saw over here. If we go ahead and kind of look over here, we can see that the sprint to fire time is 177. That's terrible. And if we went with the XRK, it would be even worse than that. So we get a little bit better improvement. And that's kind of some of the decision making when we're making with some of those attachments. Again, there's multiple good builds on this one. This is kind of the one I landed on to adjust for kind of how it works. If you don't like the iron sights, you're going to have to sacrifice something. It mainly only has vertical recoil, just literally straight vertical. You can see it has a quick climb and then it slows down. So if you adjust and then you'll be able to adjust and it'll go ahead and shoot straight for that amount of bullets or whatever the case is. Let me know what you guys are leaning to. I'm sure I left plenty of your favorites off the list because we only covered 10 today, but appreciate all the support. If you enjoy, hit the subscribe button. See you on the next one. Thank you for watching. As always, have a great day.